Apis Bull Part 2. Apis Bull Part 1 identified an Alpha and Omega history associated with ancient Israel. In the Alpha history, God's people were under Egyptian bondage, practicing idolatry, and lost sight of God and the Sabbath. The great I Am raised up Moses to lead a people out of captivity and to restore the Sabbath. We identified how ancient Israel continued in idolatry by letting go of the form whilst holding on to the character, which led them to rejecting the Messiah when he came in their Omega history. In like manner, modern history was preceded by 1260 years of darkness, and the Sabbath was not retained. William Miller was raised to agitate the people, and thus a work of reform began, which led to the restoration of the Sabbath in the post-1844 era. Whilst understanding time and the prophecies, God's people failed as they didn't give attention to the external political events happening around them. As ancient Israel blended paganism with God and fashioned the Apis bull at Mount Sinai, so did modern Israel blend apostate Protestant views with Jehovah. They thought God had favored their message and version of Christianity above everyone else and were led into the idolatry of religious nationalism. They wanted God to vindicate them whilst unwilling to interact with the world. Even after correcting their views of October 22, 1844 in the shut door together with our merciful high priest, they didn't fully recover. Post-1850, faith in the Second Advent began to wane. This led them to backtrack on their message and mission and to focus on temporal prosperity. In the 1888 period, God shed more light upon his people through the messages of A.T. Jones and E.J. Wagner, which was designed to lead them to have a clearer view of his character and the nature of his kingdom. However, the SDAs failed to see beyond the Sabbath Sunday issue when the National Reform Association was seeking an amendment of the U.S. Constitution. Sunday laws were only symbolic of the threat of religious nationalism, which taught that God is a Protestant God. The conflict in that day was about how God and Christianity were being used to justify religious superiority. The Almighty desired us to see the evils of religious nationalism and be called to abandon it, as it led to a misrepresentation of who God is. Instead of appreciating this, the SDA Church was mired in the muck. A war over the law of God and how to obtain righteousness became their focus. Protestant opposition to the Adventist emphasis on the perpetuity of God's law had entrenched them in the Protestant mindset. Thus, with the same fighting spirit, they resisted the 1888 message and manifested that they did not believe in the message of equality and liberty of conscience. The 1888 crisis, instead of moving them forward in understanding the character of the Creator, it reinforced their nationalistic thinking that God hated Protestants, since their churches were denounced as Babylon, and that he loved Adventists as modern Israel. They didn't realize that what he hated was the mindset and the flaws of the Protestant system of organization, and not the people. Today, like the days of Christ, we are in the Omega history of modern Israel. Changes in the world have created a global framework, language and common set of values that have connected all of humanity. We are confronted with global problems which require global solutions, and this has made the Almighty's reach global. We as a church must see that there is no difference between Jew or Gentile. All are under sin, drunk with the wine of Babylon. That wine represents the universal mindset of religious nationalism, sexism, and homophobia, such as social conservatism. God, through parable methodology and His chosen messengers, has given us a message on equality. This message is meant to lead us to see that God does not discriminate and loves all. However, like the days of Christ, God's people will not recognize the message of equality and cling to a plain reading of the scriptures with an emphasis on morality and reject parable methodology, which can cue them from their idolatry. Amen.